Since its inception, Plasticity has been going from strength to strength to strength. Enthusiasts and professionals alike have taken to its slick UI and speedy direct workflow for product design, 3D printing, vehicle concepts, art for games and films, and much more. Each major update, Plasticity brings us improvements to its workflow that always align with that slogan, CAD for artists. This time around is no exception either, and it seems to me that it brings the broadest selection of new tools and improvements yet. From Class A surfacing for professionals for the first time ever, to powerful new features and tools and new features and the existing tools. There are so many small and big improvements, and in today's videos I'm going to cover some of the biggest new features. Now, we can't cover them all, but I will link the complete list of updates in the description. Now let's get into it. So first of all, a little bit of housekeeping. In about a month's time from the time I'm recording this, the price for the indie license is going to increase from $150 to $175. Now, this is due to the pricing for the underlying software Parasolid going up. But even when you take this increase into account, Plasticity will still be head and shoulders the cheapest commercial CAD software available, and the studio license price will not be changing. But if you've been on the fence about buying the Plasticity indie license, you've got about a month to lock it in at a cheaper price before the increase in the price. And as always, you can get it even cheaper by using my affiliate coupon code REFUGE10 for a 10% discount off Plasticity. So let's get into what's new in Plasticity 2025.2. Okay, so the UI is much the same as 2025.1. Now, this was a bit of a bone of contention, but the toolbar was movable in the previous version, but it would forget that you had moved it to the right hand side. For those of you that like to keep it on the right hand side, if I restart Plasticity now, it remembers where it was. A few things have changed in the sort of look dev and material mode, so to speak. So if we go into render mode, we'll notice that we've got these new HDR environments. Okay, so you can change all of these, and you can also import your own. So this is one of my favorite HDRIs of all time, and I've imported that. You can change the rotation and the intensity. Okay, and one thing that you may have noticed is that there is now ambient occlusion. So if we just use something quite bright and flat, you'll notice that there's, in the crevices, it gets a little bit darker, right? So we can see this better even in shader mode. So if we go into our settings and we go into appearance, okay, you can see AO radius, and under performance, so it's toggled off right now, so you can see me toggling that on and off, and we get the AO in shader mode. It's automatically on by default in rendered mode, but it's toggleable. Now it says recommended for high-end GPUs. Now Nick the creator said 30 series and above, like NVIDIA 30 series and above. However, I found that I'm on a 5070 Ti now, and it's fine, but previously on my 2070 Super it was fine, and I even tested it on the lounge computer on the 1060 and it was fine, but they were all smaller scenes, so your mileage may vary. It doubles the amount of draw calls, the amount of rendering that needs to be done in this scene, basically. So turn it on and see how it works, even if you're on a lower end GPU. I would imagine as your scene gets more complex and there's more crevices and curvature, it might start to slow down, so you might need to turn that off. Okay, so also, if we go back into render mode over here, we've got our HDRI. Let's select this HDRI, and we go over to our assets tab. We've got all of these new materials here, which are great. So let's just select this object. We can make this aluminium, okay? And under our environment, we can rotate that. And then if you hit M, you can actually, let's just choose this aluminium matte and then hit M, and we'll be able to change the roughness of this. We can reduce it down and the metalness slightly. By the way, in the real world, there's nothing that's 100% metal or 100% flat, so you should always just bring this down a little bit. It's just best practice. And then obviously we can now tweak the, be a bit hard to see on this. Let's try a different material. So hitting M, we can now rotate the material, okay, and get it all nice and lined up. So if you're like, say, on this perforated metal and it's not lining up, you could try going and, you know, just going 45 tab 45 tab 45, and you might get a better result, something like that. Okay, so also just these materials are all very good. My like little happy point is that I actually made this material here upon a user request, and Nick decided to include it. So this hex metal is here. These textures are all 1K, by the way, so if you want to get a copy of this material in a higher resolution, you can download it from the Blender Kit plugin for Blender, and give me a nice review on it, because I do get paid for the downloads from that, okay, even though it's free. Okay, so the materials, while not crucial in plasticity, are a real nice to have. So going back into shader mode, if we actually, they're a bit obfuscated. I'll just close this here. Okay, but if you go down, there's actually two new shaders here. We've got the topographical shader, okay, and under material options, we can choose whether we want that to be X, Y, or Z, okay, and that's quite cool. Okay, so on this model, it's a little bit hard to see, but we can decrease, and it sort of makes this wireframe on whatever axis you want, and you can see the you know, the sort of curvature there. So I think that's quite handy, if I'm honest, in a lot of scenarios, especially with things like you know, reverse engineering, or just like even checking your curvature, much like you can with these guys here. And we've also got this one, which is just shows you what direction the normals are facing. So the normal of this is facing downwards, because the red shows you that that's an inverse normal, and that's your, you know, your outward facing normal. So you would want to rotate this 180 degrees. There you have it. Those are both handy. Now moving on to the surfacing and modeling tools, we'll just go into our regular shader here. And let's find something here. Let's just take a loop, okay, of these, an edge ring. Okay, so we now have tension on our fillet. So we can now, if you can see what's going on over here and down here, we're able to change the tension of our fillet without having to use a bridge curve, okay, which is really great, because that means that we can get a lot more detail out of our, now it may struggle with some, okay, but there we go, we're getting that, and it should work on all of them. And you might say that, you know, what's used is the bridge curve now, but the bridge curve has got so much better as well. So with our edges, we're going to press Shift B, and I'm just going to make a bridge curve like this. And what you'll notice is that there's these new gizmos attached to our bridge curve, and these are tension sliders that we can, instead of having to use that, we can manually use them in the viewport, and this is going to be super handy. If you're on a bridge, if you're on a curve to curve, you can go right up to G3. If you're just linking edges, like off an object, you can go up to G2. So this is really cool. You can also unlock them, so you can control one side at a time, okay, and really refine your fillet there, okay? So that is really cool. So when you sweep that along a curve, you're going to have a lot more control over your tension. So the Boolean command has had some major improvements. So if you see what I've got here, okay, we've got basically a bunch of sheets locked together. Okay, so if I select all of these and press Q, it's just going to try and do a difference by default. If we hit union, it's going to try and do that, and it's going to say the operation has failed. But we've now got this new option called region, which will capture any of the watertight components or the watertight areas of your intersections. So we've got all of these sheets making a volume, okay, and when I right click to select that, we've got this new option here. So this is really cool. We've got these two objects from all of those. We can QQ, and when we can, you know, delete the redundant topology, and we've got this object that we've made from basically, you know, cardboard cutout, and then trimming off the edges with a guillotine. So I think that's really cool for building shapes. It's just a new way to do it in Plasticity that you couldn't do before. But also, if we've got this, while we're on Booleans, and we Boolean this is always going to have been the default behavior. Okay, so this is, you know, we've got a Boolean here of a difference Boolean, but now we've got this advanced tab. Okay, so we could say that the is going to be inside, right? Target material is going to be inside, and that's going to create that inside like that on that sheet. So we could do the same again, and we could say outside, and that's going to make kind of that little like a hat there. And you can really play around with all of these different options, you know, and get something different. So we could go empty, and that's going to do nothing. Empty, empty, inside, inside, inside. I don't know. You'd have to play around to find lots of different scenarios, but this is also just having these advanced options is really cool. So I think it would be really cool for, like, you know, doing jewelry, and you could get text on there with like an imprint embossed way and things like that. So okay, so one of the new commands, now this is a studio license only one, and this is called the align command. And this is really, you know, as Nick says, it's a niche command. It's more for Class A surfaces, but I think everybody might be able to find some cool aspects to this. So with this one, look, so normally when you try and join two surfaces together, you could, like, let's say I've got these edges here. So if we've got 4 edges, we can patch, right? And we can sometimes go up to G2, not always. And we get this, but it's not always going to work out right. All right, we could loft it. Okay, and we can go up to G2, but we're getting, let's turn this shading on. We're getting these kind of indentations, right? We could, you know, mitigate this by having guides, but we could also try and xNURBS it, you know, add some guides on there as well. Take it up to G2. We're getting a very similar scenario to what we had with the loft, right? So with align, what we want to do is we want to choose one edge, right? This is the object that we're going to use to align to this edge, right? And then we can just type in to our F command, align, right? Search for align, okay? And by default, it's going to go to G0, but you can tab through to G2, right? And we're getting a, you can see this, we'll talk about these in a moment, but this is a continuity check here. Okay, and then what we can do is we can blend extra rows in, right? Maybe 2, okay? And then if we turn this guy on, right? And turn our edges off, we're getting this really nice transition, right? So this will be useful in a whole little bunch of cases. One thing that you got to acknowledge though is you're essentially aligning this edge, right, to this, and in order to so let's try this again. Okay, and we're going to go to G2, and we can turn analysis off as well. Okay, we're going to go to G2. And in order to get this to work properly, and you want this to have, we do need to add sometimes some more down the bottom if we want to blend it in. So we'll add more degrees down here to keep this original shape down the bottom. And then whatever's going to blend between here and here is basically going to distort your original shape. So this is going to be handy for a lot of people, and I know that. And if I'm just looking at this surface now, it's super smooth, right? It's superty duperty smooth. Okay, so that little check mark that we saw before was part of the new measure continuity tool. So you can actually find these here, okay, by just typing in measure. We got measure distance, which has always been there for a while now, measure curvature and measure continuity. You can also find these by holding down on this measure tool down below here. So let's choose measure continuity and just pull this across. And we know that at G0, right, that is completely okay. At G1, it's not quite meeting a G1 continuity. And at G2, it is meeting up to 0.3 G2 continuity. So if it's got a little tick, it means it's within some sort of like, there's a consensus about these tolerances being okay for that scenario. Okay, so just as a way of an example with this measure continuity, so we'll hit the measured continuity here, and we can see at G0, which means G0 means that the two items are touching, that has got a perfect continuity. But if we look at this one, it's also G0, right? But if we go to G1, we'll notice that it gets a tick because I've made this a G1 continuity. But if we bring it across to this one and we try for the G2 continuity, we're getting G2 continuity, but not on this one. So you can see with these different continuities here, so we know that this is G2, we know it's G1, and we know it's G0. This one is only G1, but it's not G2. And this one is only G0, but it's not G1. And you'll see that the G1 is blowing it right out because this is only touching. It doesn't have any curvature or tangency. So then when you get to G1, right, it's got tangency but not curvature, and you get to G2 and it's got both tangency and curvature. So looking at this broken one here, this blue line here, which might be anywhere along the curvature comb, okay, is showing you the one where it is the most, it's the most further out from all of the lines here. So that's showing you where the worst case is on this curve. Okay, so the next one is to measure curvature, which is the measure curvature, which will change from measure continuity to measure curvature. Okay. And we can see here that we're getting this curvature comb here. So we can see that this has got a very nice and smooth curvature. Maybe it's better to try this one here. So we've got this measure curvature here, and you can see here that this is all quite nice and smooth, right? But if at any point your model, I don't know if I can find anything like that, had some like ziggy zags coming out due to some bad lofting or patching or something like that, that would indicate that that's not very good, okay? And you would want to change that. As we bring this in, you can see that this is, showing fairly good curvature here, right? But there might be examples that you have where it's all like, looks like an earthquake's happened. So this is just a tool so you can eyeball, how the curves are working on your object. So what we're going to look at next quickly is some just some new quality of life stuff and some of the existing tools here. So this one here is like, let's say I wanted to make a cut across this sphere, and we would always get this cut, right? But it says fail to cut body into sections. So we can now just use this extend command, right? And that will extend this curve all the way across. Now this will be really useful. Let's say you've got a bunch of curves, right? And you've got this one here, and you've got to go into point mode. You've got to go inside the object to try and find the, the point. and then select that control point, you know, and then type in F, extend, right? This is the previous way that we used, and then we'd have to extend that through, and then you would be able to cut it. Now you can just automatically extend the curve, right? Even if it doesn't go all the way through. So, you know, just even if it's just barely touching, right? We can see, cut, extend, and that's cut all the way through. So that's cool. Now, likewise, extending a sheet, right? We can now use select target shell, and it will extend a sheet all the way up to there. So now we could just really quickly build up a nice shape, and that's got that curvature of that sphere. So this is just another thing that's just going to improve your workflow and speed things up. Okay, this next one is another studio license only thing, which is some just updates to the square command. So I'm just going to use a really simple example, and we'll stay in HDRI mode, and I'm going to give this a little bit more reflection just for the example of this. So I'm just going to bring this roughness down, and let's just give it a lighter color here. So we can see this reflection here. So the way that this one's going to work is let's just run our square command, okay, and get it up to G2. Okay, you'll notice that we've got this continuity analysis on here now as well, which is great, but you can just turn that off. But we're going to leave it on for now because we want our continuity to be correct with our square command. So one way we can do that is just to start to mess with the tension of these, okay, and you'll notice that, and we can add degrees, and that's starting to get continuity, but not all of it. We can add some spans, just one at a time, not too many. I got told off for this in my last video. So we've just added until we've got the continuity coming on. It's saying there's some problems satisfying the G2 constraint, but for this example, we don't need to satisfy the G2 constraint. So we've got G2 continuity by adding a couple of spans. Now we can add tension to our spans here. So this is really cool. Okay, and as you notice that we're moving the tension around, we can actually really get control over our reflections and our highlights, right? So you can notice this. Let's just turn this rotation of this around a little bit, okay? And we've got these highlights here, okay? And just turn the intensity down slightly so we can see these reflecting windows, right? As I move these around, you can see the reflections move. So if you want tighter highlights, right, you could bring these in a little bit, and remembering that you're keeping your continuity of your edges, right? So this is just something that's, I think, going to be really useful for artists and probably also for product designers as well. But, you know, see, I can really spread those highlights out, and this will help you control your lighting as well in your other scenes, because, you know, if you know that's going to get a softer shadow, a softer reflection, or a sharper reflection, obviously that's something that's really useful. And then we just can join that together. And if we compare this side to the other side, it's a very different look, right? So I think that's really cool. So the next thing that I want to mention is, and I do believe this is not a studio only, so we're going to go, I might just hide this for now. Let's just subdivide this. Okay, so we've got these CVs here. Okay, now isoparam. Okay, now if I just do this isoparam on this surface here, I can now press S to subdivide this, right? And then right click to confirm, and it's going to add CV subdivisions, and it's going to honor my original surface, which I can do in both directions. So it's going to honor the original subdivisions or the original CVs of my surface if I press this S button, and you can see that I get a different kind of surface. So that is really handy. And just while we're talking about CVs, previously you would, like, if you wanted to select CVs, you'd either have to select them one by one, or box select, which can be awkward at times, right? You know, we can, in this case, go into top mode and select some. We can now hold down Alt to select a row of CVs, which we can then, you know, or we could Shift G and slide them. Okay. And so this is just really handy to work with and get new shapes. Okay. So another quality of life, just new thing that's just, you know, new to an existing command is really cool. So let's just say we want to sweep this along this curve, right? We now have this distance parameter, right? Which we can use to sweep it just partially down the curve. And then also if we wanted to pipe an object, okay, we'll make a pipe out of this. We've now got distance for both ends, and this can also extend beyond the curve or back. So we can distance this how we like. So this is just really handy and useful, especially if you didn't want it to go all the way. This also works for, I believe, curve array. Okay, but it's called extent here, which is a little bit confusing rather than distance, but we can make the extent of these going down this curve array less, and we can, you know, increase the number. So if you didn't want it to go through the whole curve, or you want it to go beyond the whole curve, right, you can do that now. So that's a really handy and useful new tool. So now when we select all, right, it selects curves as well as solids, okay, which is great. You can also press Alt and A to invert a selection. Previously, there was a thing where if you hold down the left mouse button and scroll, you could scroll between objects. Okay, this still happens, but now you can press Control and click and scroll, and it won't always pick up what's behind. But if you let's say, you can see here that we can select all of the edges that are below the mouse at the time we do the Control click. So it's context sensitive. So a couple of more things that we can do now. If we've got the same material, we can hit Shift M and we can fork the material, and we can, you know, change the color on that one. So there were so many new features added to this new iteration of Plasticity that I can't cover them all, but I have covered quite a lot of them in my latest in the betas series, so you can go back and have a look at those. And if you want to learn how to make, if you're brand new and you want to learn how to make this crazy walkie-talkie with a satellite dish, I've done a long-form tutorial for beginners to Plasticity for that. And don't forget that I am a Plasticity affiliate, and if you want to get a discount off any license, you can use the code REFUGE10, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Tschüss!